Welcome you all for this class. During previous class, we have studied about capacitors and what type of the sign is used in case of electrical circuits for capacitors. Then we have discussed about capacitance definition, how the electrostatic process takes place on the surface of the capacitors plates, which is the source of storage of the charges on the plate. And then after the charges, there was a potential across the plates. And with the relation of this potential with the charge stored, we have calculated a formula. We find out the formula to calculate the capacitance of a capacitor. And then we defined the capacitance of a capacitor. And then we have also discussed about on what the factor the capacitance of a capacitor depends. Now, today's topic is basically capacitance of a parallel plate capacitor. So here it is. If you look at capacitance of a parallel plate capacitor, it is considered a parallel plate capacitor which consists of two metal plates separated by a distance d. The distance between the two plates is d. These are all types of the steps which we have already discussed in detail. Let the area of each plate is A. Why we are considering area? Because we will reach up to the surface charge density. As the distance between the plate is small, it is small as compared to the size to their size. So the electric field between the plate is uniform and fringing the field at the boundaries of the plate is negligible. So this is the most important factor considered for construction of the capacitors, so that the fringing field is very less. What was the concept of a fringing field here? If these are the two plates parallel, and you see the electric lines of forces are moving from one plate to another. So when they move to the side waves, the separation between the lines increases. When the separation between the lines increases, it results in increasing the fringing field, and due to this increasing fringing field, the intensity and the field strength decreases outside. So with this, if we reduce the distance between the plates and increase the size of the plate, it will result inside the plate. The field will be strong, it will be uniform, but the fringing field outside this possibility will reduce. So the medium between the two plates be the air, that is free space. So let the charge on the plate Q be Q, so that the electric intensity between the charged plates of the capacitor be E, which is given by Gauss's law, and we have calculated Gauss's law. Now from here our step starts. Up to this is the same. There are two plates. Inside plate there is electric field, and this field is due to the charges, and the plate size is more than the distance between the two plates, so that to field the uniform and strong field is produced. So here it is. So it is by using the definition of electric intensity. This formula we have already done. It was basically sigma divided by, I have left it just to for you to think for a few seconds what will be in place of this one. This one is basically epsilon naught. Just this is epsilon naught. This was the formula which we have already calculated for electric intensity. But at the same time, this surface charge density, that is sigma, is equal to charges per unit area. You know, already I have told why I'm considering this area, because it is playing very much important role in the existence of the charges on the plate. More is the area. This will show that the more will be the charges is stored and the more will be the surface charge density. With this area, the charges will also increase. Then the ratio will increase as a whole. This shows the surface charge density will increase. If you put the values of this charge density in this formula, and you will be getting that is Q divided by this Q divided by area of the plate epsilon naught. So this is equation 2 and this one is equation 1. From where you have calculated this equation, basically you have calculated this equation by using electric field intensity definition. Surface charge density uh, during this type of permittivity of the space, that is epsilon naught. So it depends, it means the surface charge density depends on the medium between the two plates. So after you have defined how the surface charge density is calculated in this formula, and you have defined surface charge density and now the electric intensity in the sense of charges per unit area, that is this one. For potential difference here, you know, when the charges up to this stage, when the charges are on a surface area, these charges will result into potential difference, and potential difference between the plates of the capacitors is calculated by using this formula which we have already done. It was E is equal to del V divided by del R. It was called potential gradient, rate of change of potential with respect to the distance from the charge producing electric intensity. So replace del V by V and D del R by D, then it would be V is equal to E D R. If you see, this is intensity and this intensity is equal to V divided by D. So this was the formula which we have already calculated. This is V divided by D. And we have used the definition of electric potential to reach up to this formula. So here it is, V is equal to ED, and putting the values of ED from equation 2 in equation 3. This one is equation 3, and equation 2 we have calculated the value of E, and this value of E was equal to this was equation 2 Q divided by this Q divided by A epsilon naught. So this was the formula which we have done in equation number 2. So after putting the values of this equation, that is this one, here in this formula or equation, it becomes Q D A epsilon naught. And this is the formula which is used to calculate electric potential. So if you see, if the capacitance of the capacitor having air-free space, then the charge Q on the capacitor, it is calculated by using formula Q is equal to CV. This formula was calculated by using the definition of capacitance of the capacitors, and it is Q is equal to CV. So CV is the capacitor in case of the vacuum. So after putting the values of potential from equation 4, this one is equation 4, and after putting the value of this equation in this equation, that is, this one is Q, this one is also Q, CAV, this one capacitance, and V is QD divided by A epsilon naught, Q divided by epsilon naught. So it is basically 1, that is equal to C capacitance during the vacuum and times D divided by A epsilon naught. Here it is. So we will simplify it. Up to this point, let's revise the main points which we have done for this topic. Here we were. This is the definition of electric intensity. Uh, Surface charge density divided by epsilon naught. Surface charge density is calculated by number of charges per unit area. Putting value in the equation, that is Q divided by A epsilon naught. So here it is. Then this is the definition of electric intensity. But when there are charges and electric intensity exists between the two charges or the two plates, which are separated at a distance d, then there will be electric potential difference. It is calculated by using this formula. And this formula, we will put the value of E, and then we will calculate the potential. Here it is. We have placed the value of E, and then we calculated the electric potential. So we are heading towards the capacitance of the capacitor. So this is the basic formula which is used to calculate the capacitance. Q is equal to CAV, capacitance in the vacuum, into electric potential difference, and it was calculated by using a simple formula that was Q directly proportional to V, which we have done during the initial stage of capacitors, and to find the capacitance of the capacitor, and we reached up to this formula. So here it is. And then it is capacitance in the vacuum, that is A epsilon naught, this one, and it is written as it is equal to A. We are simplifying the same equation which we have done simplification in the last step, epsilon naught divided by D. Same formula we have simplified. It is the required expression for the capacitance of the capacitors having air as a medium between the two plates. So here it is. Up to this point, what you have learned, you have calculated the capacitance of the capacitors in case these capacitors plates are separated by a distance d and the air is between them, and area of the plates is A. So if you are asked to calculate the capacitance of the capacitors, here it will be, this will be your formula to calculate when you are using air as a capacitance. Air as a medium between the two capacitors. So this will be the formula to calculate capacitance. But what will be the case when we change the medium between the two plates? That will be the relative permittivity. So let's see, follow the same steps which we have done in case of electrostatics to calculate, to find the electric field intensity relative permittivity due to relative permittivity. So here it is. If instead of free space, we are heading towards another relative permittivity, some dielectric between the two plates or the charge plate capacitor is increased, then presence of dielectric, the electric intensity between the plates capacitor decreases by the factor, that is epsilon r. Epsilon r, and is given by, it is given by then epsilon naught, and it will be epsilon r. So here it will be, then electric intensity will be due to relative permittivity will be sigma, that is surface charge density, not only divided with the epsilon naught, but it will be epsilon r times epsilon naught. This is basically relative permittivity of that medium. And again, if you see, this is the formula used to calculate surface charge density. You will put the values of surface charge density, and again you will be getting that is epsilon naught, and it will be epsilon r, and here it is epsilon r, and then you will simplify with the same, that is in this case, previous case it was V potential, that was ED. Now you will put the value of here E dash. Why? Because you are calculating during the relative permittivity. You will put the value of E dash here from E dash in this equation. You will follow the same steps for the relative permittivity as you have done in case of simple permittivity of free space. So if you look at, you have placed the values. After putting the value, you are getting basically this is epsilon r, epsilon naught, and then the next one is epsilon r, this one, And here it is. This is the electric potential which you have calculated due to relative permittivity. Again, you are using the concept of capacitance in case of the medium, that is Q here. In the previous case, it was for vacuum VAC. Now it's medium. The rest all terms are the same. Now look at this is V dash. Here it is vacuum, and this not D. This Q is cancelled with this one, and when you will simplify, it will be epsilon R. Here it is epsilon R, epsilon naught, and it is epsilon R divided by D. Because you have placed here, it will be 1 cancel with this one, and it will be equal to epsilon naught, epsilon R divided by D. This is the capacitance of the capacitors in case of a medium with other than air. So this equation shows that in the presence of dielectric, the capacitance of the capacitor increases by the factor that is epsilon R times, putting the equation in 5 in 6. If you put the 5 in 6, this is the ratio between the two, that is epsilon R. It is equal to the capacitance of the capacitors during any type of the medium, and capacitance of the capacitor in case of vacuum. So this clearly shows that the capacitance, if you introduce another type of dielectric between the two other than the air, then the capacitance of the capacitor increases by the same times epsilon R. So here it is. Epsilon R is the relative permittivity of the dielectric constant that is defined as the ratio of the capacitance of the capacitor having some dielectric in the capacitance of the capacitor having air. It has no unit because it's the ratio between the two similar quantities, and it's different for different types of the substances. So up to this point, we have calculated the capacitance of the capacitors in case of air or a simple uh, medium or vacuum, and then we have calculated the capacitance of the capacitors by following the same concepts, only adding epsilon naught as a medium, as a dielectric between the two plates. And finally, we have seen that due to this epsilon r, the capacitance of the capacitor increases by epsilon r times. So it means when you introduce any type of dielectric between the two plates, due to this dielectric, the capacitance of the capacitor increases by the same number. So what you have done, same steps you have followed, what you have followed during the calculation of the capacitance in case of a vacuum, and then you have introduced another type of a medium dielectric, and you have introduced epsilon r to calculate the capacitance of the capacitance in case of dielectric, and after calculation you have seen that epsilon r time increases the capacitance of the capacitor with the introduce of a dielectric between the plates. With this, our today's class ends. I thank you very much for your patience.